All right, I just want to welcome everybody who's sitting here, everybody who's watching this in the cafe, everybody who's watching this on Facebook Live. And I want to welcome everybody to my least favorite time of the year. It's the least favorite time of the year. And part of the reason for me why it's the least favorite time of the year is because it comes after my most favorite time of the year. And believe it or not, that's not necessarily Christmas, although I love Christmas. For me, that's the summertime. I love the summertime because the summertime is when my birthday is. The summertime is when we get to go on vacations. The summertime is when we get to hang out by the pool all day and listen to Jack Johnson music. The summertime is where my entire family, we go to sleep late and we don't even set our alarm clocks in the morning. But guess what? That is not right now, because right now is back to school. And this is where the dream has now become a nightmare. Because maybe for you, maybe you're a college student and you're just getting acclimated to life again and books and getting your schedule all set. Maybe you're a student in that way. For me, it looks something like this. It looks like getting 5 different kids to 4 different schools in the morning. I have a small group on Tuesday nights. I have Ignite on Wednesday nights. We have Taekwondo on Thursday nights. We have football on Friday nights. I have marathon training on Saturday. And then Sunday, it's like church and piano and tutoring and all of these different things. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And I'm just getting tired thinking about it right now. And a lot of times during this period or during this season, many times we have this overwhelming sense of guilt. Because when we're at work, oftentimes we feel guilty that we're not with kids. And when we're with the kids, we feel guilty that we're not at the gym taking care of our bodies. And when we're at the gym taking care of our bodies, we feel guilty about the fact that our house looks like a wreck, that it doesn't look like something out of a Chip and Joanna Gaines catalog, but that it looks instead like something out of Slumdog Millionaire. And not even the millionaire part, it's just the slum part. And so oftentimes what happens is that we get to the end of the day completely and totally exhausted, where we flop down on our beds and we kind of ask ourselves this question right here, where we kind of make this statement: there's got to be a better way to live. Have you ever thought that? You just thought to yourself, there's got to be a better way to live. In fact, the inveritable Stephen Covey said this in Forbes magazine a little bit ago, where he says that the challenge of work-life balance is without question one of the most significant struggles faced by modern man. Then I've surveyed thousands of audiences about their greatest personal and professional challenges, and life balance is always at or near the top. How many of you kind of feel the same way? How many of you kind of wish that you just had a little bit more balance in your life? So here's what I decided to do as your pastor. I decided to comb through the scriptures and look for examples of people in the scriptures, heroes of the Bible, that were able to live in this work-life balance kind of idea. And do you know how many examples I found? None. Because if you look at the example of, let's say, Moses, you look at Moses and you're like, okay, either what he's doing is he's talking to a burning bush, or he has 2 million people all reporting to him until, his father-in-law gets into the picture. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of annual reviews to do. You look at Elijah, he's either, battling the 850 prophets of Baal and Asherah, or he's sitting underneath a tree asking God to kill him. That doesn't sound like perfect balance in life to me. You look at Joseph's life, and you go, I don't really know if he lived a life of balance, because either he was doing absolutely nothing, sitting at the bottom of a prison cell, or he was managing the entire affairs of the entire nation of Egypt. So I thought to myself, if there was anybody in the Bible who was going to live this perfect Messiah life balance, well, it had to be Jesus, right? Wrong. And what you're going to find is this, that in the life of Jesus, not only do we not ever see this idea of balance, at least that we know of, because we only have a very narrow sample size of Jesus' life. However, what you'll also find is that Jesus never once in his message ever encouraged balance, did he? I mean, if anything, he encouraged radical living. He encouraged us to do what? To gouge out our eye and to chop off our right hand if it causes us to stumble. That doesn't sound like a very balanced message to me. You know, there's this guy who comes to him, and he doesn't want this guy to just give up 10% of his earnings. He wants this guy to give up everything in order to follow him. Again, not a very balanced message. In fact, if you think about this, Jesus actually went to the cross. He actually ended up being killed because he refused to balance his message and to not radicalize, maybe that's a bad word in our culture, but to not preach this radical message about himself. The funny thing is this, if you look in the Bible, nowhere does it ever teach this idea of balance. Did you know that? In fact, what you're going to find, that believe it or not, this whole idea, this whole phrase of work-life balance didn't even become a conversation in our culture until about the 80s. And then it really kind of exploded in the 90s, but never really became a conversation until that time. So here's what we want to teach today, and that's this principle right here. You ready for it? That a balanced life is a lie. Why don't you turn to your neighbor and say, "You are a liar." Okay? Okay, so this is what we want to talk about today, that work-life balance is a lie. Because I want you to think about this for a second. Whether you're balancing yourself, whether you're balancing a spreadsheet, whether you're balancing weights, or whether you're balancing tires on a car, what is balance at the end of the day? Balance has to do with the middle, doesn't it? Balance has to do with the average. So let me ask you this. How many of you would love to live average lives? Is that you today? Because if that's you today, we'd love to get you a VantagePoint t-shirt that says, "I am the 50%. Okay? Because what you're going to find is that for many of us, we don't want to live average lives. We don't want to live balanced lives. We want to live lives that are great. We want to live lives of significance. We want to live lives of purpose. We want to live lives of greatness. And what you're going to find is that greatness is never found in the middle. Greatness is never found in the average. But oftentimes what you're going to find is that greatness is found at the extremes, isn't it? Whenever you look at an athlete's life, or whenever you look at a coach's life, probably the last thing that you will say about Sean McVay or Jared Goff or somebody like Tom Brady is probably the one thing that you'll probably least say about them is, you know what I love about those guys? They live such a balanced life. Great authors, great CEOs, great politicians, great leaders, anybody who has ever achieved great results has always had to sacrifice greatly in their lives. But at the same time, what we also want to talk about today is this, and that is the fact that we know people in our lives that we don't want to be like, people who have achieved great things, and people who have made a lot of money, earned a lot of trophies, gained a lot of titles, but have absolutely shipwrecked the rest of their life in the process. And so how do we begin to maintain all of those different elements in our lives? Well, believe it or not, that's actually what we want to talk about today. If you have your Bibles, why don't you turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. Whether you're sitting here, whether you're sitting in the cafe, why don't you all stand with me as we honor the reading of God's word this morning. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. I apologize that these are going to be a good amount of verses. And so, we just want to kind of live in God's word this morning, if that's okay with you. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8 says this right here. There is a time for everything and would you all say that word with me, and a season. That's something that we really want to be able to highlight and talk about today. And a season for every activity under the heavens. That there's a time to be born and a time to die. There's a time to plant and there's a time to uproot. There's a time to kill. There's a time to heal. There's a time to tear down, and there's a time to build. There's a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. Obviously, King Solomon was not a Baptist, I guess. There's a time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, dating people, a time to search, a time to give up, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to mend, a time to be silent, children, and a time to speak, introverts. There is a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And I love what he says, skipping to verse 11. He, referring to God, that God has made everything beautiful in its time. Before you sit down, would you high five 3 people and would you say, God's timing is always perfect? God's timing is always perfect. Made everything beautiful in its time. Lord, please show me anybody know the words of that? Day, as you're teaching me your ways, that you do just what you say in his time. All the old people were singing that all together. But all the young people have no idea what we're talking about right now. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to look at King Solomon's poem, very, very famous poem. King Solomon is the one who wrote Ecclesiastes towards the end of his life. And what he wants to talk about is he wants to talk about the very purposelessness and the very meaninglessness of life without God, when we do not focus ourselves and when we do not center ourselves on the purposes of God. Now, what a lot of people do is they like to use this poem to talk about how it is that we are to keep everything in life in perfect balance with each other. But what I want to do today is I want to talk about how maybe that's not necessarily the case, because let's go ahead and look at the first verse of that again. There's a time to be born and there's a time to die. Okay, so let's talk about a time to be born. If you've ever had a baby born in your house, there is no such thing as balance in your life, right? Because you have the sleep schedule of a vampire, you're waking up at multiple times in the night, you never leave the house, and there's never ever a time where this perfect little angel has said, Mother, you look so tired. You look exhausted. You know what? You're totally out of balance. You need to get some rest, and I'll go ahead and take care of myself. You never really see that, and what you find is that during that time, oftentimes mothers, you feel guilty, don't you? You feel guilty that your entire life has focused on this baby, and you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your family, you can't take care of your house. And what we want to talk about today is maybe that's the season that you're in. What does it say? There's a time to be born and a time to die. If you've ever had a death in the house, is your life balanced? Absolutely not. I mean, the grieving and the mourning process has absolutely taken over your life. You can't go to work. You can't take care of yourself. You can't take care of anything else except for think about the grieving process at the time. He goes on to say this, there's a time to tear and there's a time to mend. There's a time to be silent. There's a time to speak. There's a time to love. There's a time to hate. Can I tell you this? You can't do all of those things at the same time without someone having to check you into the funny farm. Can you love and hate at the same time? Can you be silent and speak at the same time? Absolutely not. And so what I think King Solomon is doing is King Solomon isn't talking about handling all of these things, all of these different aspects of our life in perfect balance with each other at all times. But rather what I think he's trying to do is he's calling us to handle them in their seasons, in their own way. In other words, here's the principle that he's trying to teach right here, that you need to embrace your season. Would you say that with me? That we need to embrace your season. Here's a question that I have for you right now. What season of life are you in? What season of life are you in? Are you a student? Are you a college student? Are you a young adult? Do you have a job? Do you not have a job? Are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have not kids? Are you retired? What you're going to find is that the demands of your life are going to be totally different depending upon the season that you're in. Here's another way of looking at it, and that is this. Are you in a springtime of your life? Meaning this, is it a season of opportunity? Is it a season of hope where things are just beginning to blossom? Is it a season of summer where everything is just coming into fruition? Oh my gosh, you see fruit here. You see fruit in your family. You see fruit in your job. Is this a season of fall for you where everything is just kind of closing down and slowing down a little bit? Or maybe for some of you, is this a season of winter where you're looking around going, hey, I don't know if I see God anywhere. I have absolutely no idea where he's working, and I just have to take it by faith that God is just kind of working beneath the surface of my life. See, here's what I believe. I believe that so many of our frustrations in life come because we're trying to handle something in this season of our lives that was never meant to be handled in this season of our life. Let me give you an example of this, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be life stage or anything. Many of you know this, but about 2.5 years ago, I got into a car accident where a truck hit me while I was running. So I got hit by the side mirror of an F-150 going 50 miles an hour because the guy was DUI at 9 o'clock in the morning. Tore almost every ligament in my neck, and somebody had said that literally that my head was just barely hanging on by a thread at that point. So here's one thing that you have to understand about me, that I couldn't do anything during that time. I couldn't get into bed by myself. I couldn't get out of bed by myself. I couldn't shower by myself. I couldn't bathe by myself. Here's another thing that I felt incredibly guilty about. I couldn't work at all. I mean, I couldn't go to meetings. I couldn't go to the church office. I couldn't preach. I couldn't make decisions. I felt so sad because I couldn't micromanage anybody. I had nobody to boss around. And I felt so guilty. Part of the reason was because I felt like I was sitting on my butt doing nothing. Now, let me ask you this. Was I actually sitting on my butt doing nothing? No. I was doing the most important thing that I could have done during that season, and that was to recover, right? Do you remember this? I don't know if we have a picture of this. Do we have a picture of this? Yeah. Like, I came back a month later, and I was preaching with this neck brace on my neck. You remember that? I was like, preaching to that side like this, and I was preaching to this side like this. And every time I looked down at the Bible verses, I would, have to, it looked like I was bowing at you. And I really, truly believe that part of the reason why I still have all this pain and residual soreness in my neck, you know why? Because I wasn't able to embrace my season. Because I could not feel guilty about not being able to do in this season what I could do when I was strong and healthy. Can I tell you this? Some of you are going through chemo treatments right now. And here's what you need to understand. You need to embrace your season. You know why? Because you have cancer. And one of the greatest pieces of advice that anybody ever gave to me during my season of recovery was this. It is not weak of you to receive help. It is strong of you to receive help. And don't worry, your season is coming where you get to help other people, but that season is not right now. This is your season to receive help. And that's okay. That you need to embrace your season. What does the Apostle Paul say? The Apostle Paul, he's shacked up in a Roman prison. And do you know what he writes? He writes this verse right here. Philippians chapter 4, verse 1. It says this, that I have learned to be content and I have learned to be happy, would y'all say that word with me? Whatever the season I'm in, Here's what I've learned to do. I've learned not to look forward to the next season, but I've learned to be happy in the season that I'm in right now. That whether I have a job or whether I'm collecting an unemployment check, that whether I'm living in my own house or whether I'm living with my in-laws, oh Lord forbid. That whether I'm sick or whether I'm healthy, whether I'm married or whether I'm single, that what I've learned to do is that whatever the circumstances around me, I have learned to receive the Lord's help and understand that this is exactly where God wants me to be. Oftentimes, what do? We're like this, oh, I'll be so happy once I go to college. I'll be so happy once I graduate from college. I'll be so happy to get married. I'll be so happy to get a job. I'll be so happy once we have kids. I'll be so happy when I retire. I'll be so happy when ... And what the Apostle Paul is telling us is this, that we don't become content because God finally gives us every desire of our heart, that we become content when we finally accept the limitations of my situation. That there's never, ever going to be a time where God gives you exactly what you want. You know why? Because even if he did, you'd still be a miserable wretch. That contentment, that happiness comes only when we're in the season that we're in. We see the limitations that loom over us, and we finally say to ourselves, you know what, God? This is exactly where you want me to be. Because when you begin to realize that, what you begin to understand is this, that with every season not only comes its own unique challenges, but with every season also comes its own unique blessings. So here's something you need to understand about me. I'm all about efficiency. I'm all about getting the job done as quickly as possible. How many of you are like that? How many of you are like that? Okay, that's just a really nice way of saying that we're all really impatient. Okay? And so in God's infinite wisdom and his infinite sense of humor, God has deemed fit then to give this very impatient person 5 children. And I have a 4-year-old that oftentimes his bedtime ritual takes longer than the construction of the Hoover Dam. And so this is what Daddy always does. I'm always like this. Come on, Judah. Jammies, teeth, and potty. Jammies, teeth, and potty. I can't even say the phrases, because they take too long. Jammies, teeth, and potty. So hurry up, put on your jammies. And he's like, brush your teeth. And he's got an electric toothbrush. You know why? Because obviously it takes too long to give him a manual toothbrush. And then we sit down and we hurry up and we read him stories. Parents, have you ever done this? I don't even read every word on the page. Yeah, I look at the book and I'm like, what is this, War and Peace for Children? So I'm like this. Harold had a purple crayon. Done. Okay, go to bed. Go to bed. I'm right about to leave his room, and he's like, Daddy, can you pray for me? And I'm like, oh, I cannot not pray for you. I'm a pastor. So I walk back into his room, and I pray for him, and then I'm leaving his room, and he's like, Daddy, can you rub my tummy? And I'm like, oh, why are you so cute? Okay, I'll rub your tummy, and then as I'm leaving again, Daddy, can you sing me a song? And I'm like, darn you! And why am I so frustrated? Why am I so frustrated? Because he won't let me leave the room. Without understanding that within a few years, he may not want me in his room to begin with. That I may be at a time where I kind of peek in through the door and I go, hey, can I just come in for a second? And he might be like, you know what, Dad, I'm really busy with homework right now. And then I'm going to be like this. Okay, yeah, I guess I'll just go eat ice cream by myself then. I don't know if you know this, but my wife and I usually like to go to sleep by about, 6:30 or so. Now, don't get me wrong. On New Year's Eve, I will stay up until about 7. Y'all watch the ball drop in New York City. I watch the ball drop in London. Okay, so I have two teenagers, right? I have two teenagers, and kid you not, right as we're about to flip off the light, right? I don't know if they have a hidden camera in our room, but two of my teenagers will bust into the room. They will flop down on our bed, and they'll be like, hey, Daddy, you want to watch this video? Hey, Daddy, you want to see this meme? Did you know that there's extended scenes to Endgame? And wasn't Endgame the most awesome movie in the whole world? Daddy, this is what's going on in football. And I'm like, I don't care. Get out of my room. And why am I like that? Do you know why? Because I don't realize that within a few years, they're not only going to leave my room, they're going to leave my house. Because they hate me. Amen. Looks like somebody's met my children. Students, can I talk to you for a second? I know that you want to hurry up and become an adult, but being an adult is overrated. Come on. You guys are finally awake. And man, you are going to have more bills and more responsibility than you ever knew what to do with. Okay? So here's my advice for you. You need to embrace your season. You need to embrace the season that you're in. Man, we would kill somebody to go back to college. Some of you are dating right now, and you want to play house right now. You want to get things out of order, and I totally understand that. But here's what you need to do. You need to embrace your season. Here's one of the points that I want to make, though, and that is this, that as you embrace your season, here's another point that I want to make, and that is this. Don't let your postponements be permanent. Don't let your postponements be permanent. So what I'm saying is this. Okay, for example, there is a season of your life, let's say, where even for me, I can hyper-focus on my work in order to achieve great results. I mean, that's what we have to do in order to achieve great results in work, in some of these places, in their seasons. We have to be able to be willing to make great sacrifices for a season. For me, you know what that's called? That's called whenever we're in a building season. For me, that's called whenever it's around Christmas, whenever it's around Easter. There are a lot of times where my children don't see me that much. I'm utterly exhausted. I'm going crazy, and I'm going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And let me ask you this. During that playoff season, am I outside of God's will? No, I'm not. I'm right in the middle of God's will. Because everybody has to have a playoff season in their life. That exhaustion is exhilarating, isn't it? That exhaustion is what allows us to achieve what we need to achieve. That exhaustion is just something that is so we have to have a playoff season, but you can't have your playoff season last forever. Here's another thing. There are times where I have an off season. For me, it's called the summer. There are times where I almost kind of feel over-rested a little bit. And am I outside of the will of God for being over-rested at that time? No, because it's a season. It's a short season, and what you're going to find is that is not sinful to feel that way. That is a season. Here's the problem, though. When you allow your season to last a lifetime, then you'll never end up leaving a lasting legacy. Let me say that one more time. When you allow your season to go past a playoff season and to become a lifetime, then what will happen is that you will never leave a lasting legacy. Because you can, let's say, business person, you can neglect your children for a little bit of time. You can be gone for a week. You can be gone for a couple weeks. You can be gone for a couple months. But if you're gone for a couple years, if you miss their childhood, that is something that's totally different. Because you can come home at that point, and what you can't do is this. Hey, everybody, we're going to make up for all sorts of lost time. And so let's load up the car. Tonight, we're going to visit every one of our favorite restaurants. We're going to eat. We're going to talk, and we're totally going to make up for lost time. Is that going to work? No. Because what you cannot make up for is a child's birthday party. Because what you cannot make up for is the lost soccer game. Because here's the thing. Is going to an adult child soccer game the same as going to a kid's child soccer game? No. No, it isn't. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 and 16 says this right here. Be careful then. Be careful about your seasons and how you spend your time. He's saying this, be a wise person and not an unwise person. And how do wise people live? They make the most out of every opportunity. You know what that means? This is totally off script, but that means when you're at work, be at work. Don't be on social media. Don't be texting people. Focus on your work so you can go home as quickly as possible. And here's another thing. When you're at home, don't be at work. When you're at home, don't be on social media. When was the last time that you thought, man, social media, what an incredibly valuable thing in my life? Focus. We are such a distracted culture. Okay, I have 5 different balls, and then I'm going to go ahead and stop, okay? All of these different balls represent some type of aspect of your life. This ball right here represents work. This ball represents your family life. This ball represents your relationship with God, and this ball represents your health. The great thing about your work ball is that you can neglect this ball for a little bit, and what's going to happen when you neglect this ball? It's the only ball that's going to bounce right back. Because what can happen for short amount of time is, you know what's going to happen? I don't know. Maybe you'll get one bad performance review. You can bounce back from that. Maybe what'll happen is that, I don't know, you'll get a transfer. Maybe you'll get demoted. Maybe you'll lose that job, but are you going to end up finding another job? Yeah. Finding another job is not like finding another family. And here's what I want to talk about. When it comes to your health, you know this. You can neglect your health for the short amount of time, for weeks, for months, for a little bit. You can neglect it. I can't juggle. And I definitely can't juggle with a microphone in my hand. That you can, while you're focusing on doing this, you can neglect this for a little bit. But if you allow your postponements to be permanent, what's going to happen? You're going to have a lot of pieces to pick up. In other words, that you can neglect your, what was the other thing? You can neglect your health. Did I already say that? You can neglect your family. You can neglect your family for a little bit. When was the last time that a pastor told you it was okay to neglect your family? Okay. You can neglect it. You can go on a business trip for a week. You can be gone for a certain number of weeks during the year. But if you allow your season to last a lifetime, you better watch out. Like your relationship with God is the same thing, right? I mean, you always think, well, I can take 1,000,000 steps away from God, and it only takes me 1 step to come back, right? Have you ever met somebody who took 1,000,000 steps away from God and never took that 1 step back? That's what can happen in your relationship with God, too. So CPAs, can I talk to you for a second? I know it's easy for you to go, okay, honey, it's tax season, 4 months, I'm not going to see you. I'm not going to see anybody else. I'm going to eat Flamin' Hot Cheetos for 4 months, and I'll see you when I come up for air. You know, it's possible still to go, okay, during those 4 months, what is something I can do for my family? What is something that I can do to invest in my relationship with God? Coaches, administrators, teachers right now, I know you're all in your headspace about your season, but remember, you can't go away from those glass balls for too long, okay? So here's one thing that I'd love for you to consider. What is one thing that you can do for your family? What is one thing that you can do for your family? During the busy season, here's an idea that I'd love for you to write down. That only during this busy season that you both will go to sleep at the same time every day. But I like to, okay, yeah. Let's time out for a second. You remember that? Okay. What I think might be a great idea is just during, you got to sleep, right? Just to make, because it's such a great time to connect emotionally. It's such a great time to connect physically. That's important in a relationship. What else can you do during that one time, during this busy season? Maybe you're going to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to eat dinner together like once a week. We're going to eat dinner together twice a week. Maybe you kind of feel like you're just two ships passing in the night, and you work during the day and he works at night. What can you do? Can you just FaceTime each other for 30 minutes during lunch? You've got to do something. Here's another question I want to ask you. What's one thing that I can do for my health? So during this busy season, maybe you're going to say, okay, just for these next couple months, I'm just not going to drink soda. Okay, just during these busy couple months, what's going to happen is I'm just not going to eat dessert. Because let me tell you this, as long as you have one thing that keeps you in place, that's a lot better than addressing the what the heck syndrome. You know what the heck syndrome is? It's this. My life is so out of whack that what the heck? I'm just going to do anything. You just need one thing that holds you into place. Here's the last question. What am I going to do with my relationship with God? How do I stay connected with God? Maybe you're not here on Sundays. Maybe you do travel ball. Can you at least watch the Facebook Live service? Can you? I don't have time. Can you at least look at the Bible verse of the day on your YouVersion app? I bet you can do that. Okay? Why don't you bow your heads and pray with me?